3 months to read One Piece? That's wild, man.
When you're a DJ who's as old as I am, you get given a lot of gigs where it's like, yeah, just go up in the corner. No one's going to see you all night. Like I'd play to like a stadium of people who didn't even know I was there. And so I'll put the next song on and then I would have my iPad like on the mixer and I would just read chapter after chapter of One Piece. So I read a lot of it while getting paid to DJ. As an extra flex. Yeah.
So that might be the coolest way someone has ever like consumed One Piece. You've been like, yeah, it's just like DJ to a stadium of people.
Well, hello, and welcome back to Gateway to Anime. How are you all? What's going on? We are the podcast where we try and throw open the gates to anime, where we deep dive into the classics and bring you all the best new anime. Ever wanted to get into anime but didn't know where to start? Well, we are the podcast for you. I'm your host, Sam, and today we have a very special guest. Andrew Levins, how are you, mate?
Hey, I'm really good. You forgot to announce who this
She's
is.
coming in.
Yeah,
Oh, bring her in.
I'm just like always here though. So at this point, you know, hey, what's up? I'm Charlie. Back on to the guest. More
Actually,
exciting.
I thought you were an anime statue.
Oh, true. Oh, I wish.
Yes, so today we have a very special guest. We have Andrew Levins. Now, Andrew, your bio is fascinating. Every time I read it, I'm like, that's one of the coolest bios I've ever seen. So why don't you just tell people a little bit about what you do? Because it is so fascinating.
Well, now the main thing I do is videos on TikTok and Instagram about Japanese toys and all the things that I'm obsessed about, including manga and anime. But as you'll learn very soon, the types of manga and anime I love don't lend themselves to lots and lots of views. So mostly it's toys. But I've been a collector all my life, and then I just basically like always challenge myself, oh, this thing I like, how do I turn it into a job and stop being able to like, you know, enjoy it just for the sake of enjoying it.
I know the feeling.
So I've been a DJ since I was a teenager, not just a club DJ, also a radio DJ. I was a host on FBI radio in Sydney and Triple J for a while as well. But yeah, I've been DJing for like more than half my life at this point and collecting records all through that. And then I've always loved comic books. Had a bunch of podcasts over the years, including one called Serious Issues, which is a weekly comic book podcast that I did with King's Comics in Sydney. And that one drew me truly insane because for about 2 years, I read every single #1 issue that came out every single week. And
Wow.
Marvel alone would sometimes put out like 27 #1 issues. And I'd be like, yeah, fun, I'll read all of these.
Oh my
and
Lord.
the reviewer would be like, yep, this one's fucked. This one also fucked. So that broke me as a person. And my co-host, the awesome Siobhan Coombs, who now runs a comic book company called Cockatoo Comics that do a lot of like local comic book festivals and stores and stuff like that. She was always trying to like, hey, you know, I'd be like, this week I read 12 different variations on Spider-Man. And she'd be like, cool, I read the first volume of Monster by, you know, Urasawa. And then, or she'd be talking about like, I read Blackjack by Tezuka. And I'd be like, yeah, one day I'll get into manga. And it took like the Shonen Jump app releasing in Australia, so however many years, 6 years ago when that came out, and I was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna read all. At that point, it was less than 1,000 chapters of One Piece, and I just did it over 3 months, and it was one of the best things I've ever done in my life. I was like, now I see where this thing, like, you know, you see the characters for it everywhere in Japan,
Of course.
and I just, you know, provided the context for why it's so popular, but also just that when you grow up reading superhero comics, you enjoy the one creator working on them for what, 4-6 years at most. Most of the runs will be like, oh yeah, this guy, we'll give him a chance for 10 issues. And if that doesn't work, he's out of here. And it's a new creative team, a new creative vision.
Yes.
Same character, but it's a greatly different. Or it'll be like, oh, the character's like this in the movies now, so we've got to change them in the comics. And I just got so sick of that, of a series that I was enjoying suddenly just fucked over by having to tie into an event series or whatever. And then reading One Piece, which was, it started in 97 and, you know, it's still going today. The entire time it's been written and drawn by the same dude. obviously he has like people that help him that have changed over the years, but it's his singular vision. And I think it's that nature of storytelling that really appeals to me. That really like from that point forward, I was like, okay, I'm just going to binge read all of the great shonen series. Then I'm going to find out what shoujo series I'm going to read next. And then I'm going to go all the way back to like 60s and 50s and 70s. And there's just so much to history that I was just bathing in, and learning more and more about. And then I also have kids. So I've written my own books that have been published by Penguin. So I have a series of kids books, and I'm always on the lookout for series that we can enjoy together. So my kids, they read tons of manga and like classic comic books, like comic book strips from like the 40s and 50s in America.
Wow.
Like that era of comics is so pure to me. And like Uncle Scrooge, Donald Duck, Karl Barks, which is actually going to tie into what we're talking about today.
Yes.
And then through that and like traveling, going to Japan together, and just my nature of always wanting to collect like, books and records, then it was like them getting into particular characters. And at the moment my kids got into the Hello Kitty universe, the Sanrio characters, that was what I was like, oh wow, like I love this stuff. I love these cute characters, and I love that this company has existed since like the 70s, and there's so many different characters. So I just became obsessed with like, well, I have to try and find merch for every single character Sanrio ever made. And all the while I was getting really, really into that. And obviously all the merchandise that came with all the manga series I was getting into, and the video games I play. I just, TikTok was exploding, and I was working at a radio station called Cater, which is like a very youth-focused radio station. I was by far the oldest person that had like a segment on the launch lineup of that station, and they were all on TikTok. And I was like, well, I'm too old for TikTok. But then I got COVID, so I locked myself away in my office, which is separate to the house. When we moved into our place now, I turned a shed into my office where I could keep all my crap, and it's my own thing. No one else needs to deal with how much stuff I own. It's just there. And I started making videos about my collection, and like it honestly took a week, and one of my videos like blew up and got like over 1 million views. And I was like, oh wow, there's something in this. So I just started making videos about my toy collection, and that's kind of the main thing I do now.
Well, it's so exciting, man. It's so cool. Now, before we dive even further into this episode, I want to thank this episode's sponsor, Mercari. The link is in our bio. Check it out, and we'll be back to tell you more about them soon. So, Levins, I guess what's interesting about your story is you kind of seem to have consumed a lot very fast. Like 3 months to read One Piece. That's wild, man.
Well, so when you're a DJ who's as old as I am, you get given a lot of gigs where it's like, yeah, just go up in the corner. No one's going to see you all night. Like I'd play to like a stadium of people who didn't even know I was there. And so I'll just, I'll put the next song on, and then I would have my iPad like on the mixer, and I would just read chapter after chapter of One Piece. Wow. So I read a lot of it while getting paid to DJ. As an extra flex. Yeah.
So that might be the coolest way someone has ever like consumed One Piece. Like, yeah, I was just like DJing to a stadium of people. I mean, most people are like, I was locked in my room as a teenager. I was
gee, Wano's really heating up.
Wow.
So I guess I want to ask you something before we're going to dive into a person who we've mentioned many times on this podcast, but we've never actually talked about specifically in an episode. And that is, of course, who is referred to as the god of manga, Osamu Tezuka. But before we do that, what are your thoughts on manga versus anime? Sounds to me like you read more manga than you watch.
Yeah,
Like,
I was gonna say.
So much more. Like to the point
Yeah.
where like I will regularly read. I reckon each year I read maybe 10 series that have more than 500 chapters. But the idea of watching the anime adaptations of that is like pulling teeth out of my head.
Wow.
I find the pacing of a story that has already been told through manga, like One Piece is a great example. The manga to me is like one of the most creative, fun, like lightning paced reads. But you watch one episode and they stretch out one chapter to fit that full 20 however many minutes. And I just find it so tiresome where you're just waiting for the cool thing to happen. And cool things happen all the time in One Piece. It shouldn't feel like that to watch it. That said, I love the One Piece movies because that's a new story that they're telling with the assets that already exist there.
Yes.
And I watch a lot of like original anime. I love movies, for example. Even like like Slam Dunk, one of my favorite series.
So good.
The first Slam Dunk, my favorite movie of last year.
Me too.
Oh, amazing!
It was that and Godzilla -1 were the two of my favorite movies last year.
Thank you to Segoyko.
Thank you, Segoyko.
Bringing out two of the best movies of last
but
year.
yeah, first Slam Dunk. I haven't even read the manga. And I went in completely blind and was just like, oh, yeah, we'll see how this goes. And then I came out being like, I would die for every single one of those players. Like, they're my favorite team.
Have you read it since?
No, I need to.
Oh, my God.
I'm really bad. We're the opposite.
Okay, right.
Yeah, I need to read more manga.
That should be like the series that you actually track down and make it. If you're already invested enough to say that was my favorite movie of last year, the manga is... Like, the reason that movie is so good is because it was a new story written and directed by the mangaka, the creator of the manga series. So he took a hiatus of 2 of his long-running series,
Vagabond as well.
Vagabond and Real, so he could just raise his kids. And then what got him back into creating again was like the threat of his beloved, first ever manga hit being turned into a movie. And he thought, well, I want to be as involved as possible. He's never directed a movie before. That was his first movie that he's ever directed. Was the first Slam Dunk.
Wow.
Which I think is like easily the best, like you've never seen that level of like frantic action in a sports movie before. And like for that to be, his first effort as a director is mind blowing.
In a way, he's a genius. Like there's no question. He's an absolute genius.
Yeah. But the manga is like, even though you know how that story ends because you've seen the movie, the journey you go on with those characters, like you're just like, oh, like that, if you're already feeling the love for them already, like it's so. I have no interest in basketball, right? I have no interest in teen delinquency. And yet those things come together and I'm fucking crying like every second chapter towards the end of that series. It's so well done.
Because it's interesting this one because obviously there is an anime adaptation and I would usually be like, oh, I'll just go watch the OG. But now I'm like, oh, it is kind of hard to go back to old school animation like that.
See, I would rather go back to a very, very dated feeling 90s animation just because I love the aesthetic of that.
Yes, I do.
Yeah. And the Slam Dunk anime is pretty fun. But again, it's nowhere near on the same level as the manga.
Yeah. Because my main criticism of the movie is I was like, I wanted to see more of that redhead guy. Turns out he's the protagonist of the whole series.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, good. I'm glad there's a whole entire series based around this one character.
That's why the movie's so good, though, because they were like, well, let's retell that final game that they were never able to animate in the original anime, but we'll do it from the POV of the character whose backstory we never told in the series. And then make him the best character, like, maybe second best after Sakuragi, but I saw that for the first time when I was in Kyoto last year.
Wow.
Oh, cool.
I'm going to movies in Japan. Like, I know it's like thing in Japan equals better is such a cliche, but like going to movies in Japan rules so hard. They give you a present for going to see a movie. Like, so I got a sticker sheet of like all the different characters, and I went and saw Shin Kamen Rider when I was there as well. Yeah. And you get like dog tags, and then the drink holder was like Kamen Rider's bike that you wear around your neck and put your drink there.
That's
so good. But yeah, seeing that at the movies, even though I couldn't, like, my Japanese is very limited, but like that movie is so thrilling. So when it finally got announced that it was getting an English release last year, I took so many of my friends to go see it. Like,
man.
I'm have limited spare time, so the idea of seeing a movie more than once is very, very rare for me. But I saw that 3 times, and I'm probably gonna watch it a 4th probably tonight.
Yeah. It inspired me. Well, I mean, also a guest of this show, who I believe you know as well, Alexei Toliopoulos, was one of his favorite films of last year as well.
So I took him to see it.
Yeah. Oh, there you go.
There you go.
I was like in his ear, like, come on, dude, we got to see it. It's my favorite movie. You got to come see it.
Yep.
And not only that, this is so dumb, but the month beforehand, I'd filmed a campaign for where I live. The council did like a food campaign because I forgot to mention that I used to be a chef. I used to have a restaurant, and I still write and make videos about food with everything else I do. And they had me host.
Do you see what I mean about the bio, people? This is why I mentioned the bio. It's outrageous.
Nobody ever asked me what I've done in my life if I'm anywhere near you because this is so sick.
It's so cool.
But I did a campaign for like eating in Parramatta where I go to like a bunch of restaurants and bars and blah, blah, blah. And that actually aired before Slam Dunk. So then they cut like a cinema reel, and it was like, hi, I'm Levins, and everyone at the cinema, because it was like no joke, it was like me and the Sans Pants guys and like a bunch of other podcasters and friends all came to the ones showing, and everyone's just like, oh!
It is interesting because obviously our show is obviously called Gateway to Anime. So like for us, anime has always been the thing. And obviously we got into it very young, right?
Yeah.
Manga was much harder to get a hold of.
So expensive as well.
So expensive in Perth in the mid-2000s. But
In the what?
we're not that old. Mid-2000s.
In 2014.
Yes, 2014 when we grew up in
You guys,
Perth.
you guys sound significantly younger than me. I wouldn't worry too much. I'm 40 next year. Like,
right on.
I know I'm like the guy wearing like 8-year-old's clothes, but like, I'm like
We're all young in spirit,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, and that's what matters. But it was very hard to get a hold of in WA back then, and also
it still is now. I regularly, when touring, like I always make an effort to go to every bookshop when I'm in all the capital cities. And Perth has a couple of okay places, but it's weirdly enough, Adelaide, like if you're looking for comics and manga, so good, so many great places.
Right.
Yeah,
Good
yeah.
to know. Adelaide people represent.
Yeah.
But yeah, and also the internet wasn't there was no Shonen Jump app.
No,
nothing.
totally, yeah.
Concept of an iPhone was foreign as aliens were to us back then. So
We had LimeWire, and that was bad news for everyone.
that was bad
involved.
news, and we had VCDs of Naruto. So I guess it's interesting because I find it's interesting to talk about pacing because I've never read One Piece, obviously, because it's been something I've been meaning to do. I know.
Once you start, you're like,
I
oh, this is
know.
my life now.
I
But
feel
this is
like
why
One
I've
Piece
been worried about it.
is the right one to read though, because it is just so long, and like watching the anime now, and the idea of dedicating that amount of time it kind of feels impossible to me. I say like I don't watch a million episodes of anime a week. Like I could do it if I wanted to, but I don't want to. I should read it though. That's one. Is it on the Shonen Jump app? It is.
Yeah, and the Shonen Jump app is like, I know I sound like an ad right now, and I regularly do ads that sound like ads on my videos, and I'm sorry, it's just the way I talk now. But the Shonen Jump app is like, I think $4 or $5 a month to read their entire back catalog. So you can read every Dragon Ball chapter, you can read every Naruto chapter, you can read every One Piece, and then all the really great new ones like Blue Box and I'm trying to think of like some of the really good ones.
Dun Dun Dun,
so I sound really
awesome,
cool.
yeah.
But yeah, Dun Dun Dun's on there. There's a really good one about like Japanese theater that I can't remember the name of right now, but I love that one a lot.
About
Yeah.
Kabuki, or is it?
No, it's about
Showa Rengoku.
yeah, that's the same thing, which is that's one of my favorite anime series.
Me
That
too.
anime is better than the manga. So there
Incredible,
we go.
incredible. We
What's
should
it
do
called?
an episode
Showa Rengoku something Shoju.
Yeah.
Rakugo.
Rakugo.
And
Yes.
the name of the Shonen Jump series starts with A, and I can't remember it right now, but it's really good. But there's so many series there, and my son shares the account with me, and so he's 10 now, and I thought I was a fast reader. He read all like 350 chapters of Dr. Stone in less than a week.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
And he just he just lives it. He's just like, will just want to talk to me about all the things that happened. And like, can you believe this? And I'm like, Archie, you know what the craziest thing is? You just read something that took someone like 12 years to create in a week. And that like, yeah, it's so mind blowing.
Insane.
I think that's like, yeah, being able to like take in someone's life work. Whereas the anime, like it's, yeah, there are definitely instances where the anime is as good as the manga, like Full Metal Alchemist, for example. I think definitely has moments where the anime is as good. Although I would probably argue that the manga is probably better overall.
Interesting.
But
Disagree. I've read and I've watched.
Ooh,
Yeah.
we got a debate.
Wow, let's get into it. No.
but I don't know. I think it's the singular vision. It's when you have, you know, a director trying to honor the vision that was put forward in the manga while still trying to put their own, and fair enough too, their own personality and nuances into it. I think sometimes it's lost.
Fair.
And look, we are at some point going to be talking about Tezuka today, and I think no one has like you think the jump of like quality from One Piece manga to One Piece anime is bad. Like Tezuka's manga is still, you go back and you read a book that he wrote in like 1957, and it is as readable as any of the other shit on your shelf today, especially if you compare it to like Western comics. Like, have you ever tried to read like classic X-Men, like Chris Claremont? It's like the most over the top, exposition heavy, like there's the narration has narration, you know what I mean?
Right.
But you go back and read Tezuka stuff, and like whatever jarring like things that stop you from liking it, like you're like, oh, this is a bit strange, you get over it so fast and you're just immediately sucked into the world. But his anime, I guess, given the limited technology and budget that he was working with when he started to become an animator, I just find his animated productions so jarring compared to how like fun and creative his manga is. And I've actually been to the Osamu Tezuka Museum in Osaka. They really, really focus in on the animation. There's like actually like a whole level dedicated to like learning how to animate which is really fun.
Cool.
But it's like, this is not why I like this dude.
Interesting. Well, while we've come to this natural point, let's talk about Osamu Tezuka, because, as I mentioned before, he is known as the god of manga, the godfather of manga, the father of manga. He is the reason that manga as exists today and anime as exists today is all because of him. Everything, and it's not even being like over the top. It's true. Like, he is the man who began everything. And of course, there is actually some issues with that legacy. But why don't we start? I mean, I've got a lot of stuff here about
This guy's trying to be a scholar.
Tezuka, but
yeah.
as someone who's been there and knows a lot about Tezuka, why don't you tell people what he means to you and how important he was to shaping the world of anime and manga that exists today?
Yeah, I mean, look, his story is crazy because he's one of those people that like already had a job. He's a
good one.
Fully trained doctor.
Yeah.
And while he was like treating people during the war, he treated an American soldier who, as thank you, gave him a Walt Disney comic, which contained a Carl Barks Donald Duck story in it. And Tezuka was like, this is the best shit I've ever seen in my life. And dedicated himself to, like, whenever he wasn't saving lives at the hospital, like drawing like Disney characters. And his early style is very, very influenced by that classic Disney era.
Big time.
In the same way that a lot of the monsters you see in the early chapters of One Piece, they're clearly influenced by Disney too. But he basically like started doing his own like takes on like classic children's stories, and he's very young and like basically publishing manga as he's learning how to make it.
Yeah.
But he becomes really, really popular really fast and basically shapes the genre, becomes what it is. Not the genre, but like I guess the art form that is manga becomes what it is because of what he's creating. So as he's creating all of these like legendary adventure stories for kids, that defines what people, the public, view manga as. Manga is adventure stories for children.
Yes.
And it isn't until like the late 60s, 70s that other manga creators start to challenge the rules that Tezuka has kind of set for himself and therefore the medium, that they actually say like, oh no, we want to tell stories for adults that aren't about, you know, goofy comedic adventures for kids. And so in order to distance themselves from it, they actually start like a subgenre or like their own medium, which is not called manga, it's called gekiga, which means it's basically like about like dramatic pictures as opposed to like fun pictures. I think I might be getting that right. And then he in turn goes, well, I can write messed up stories for adults too. And he starts writing like these phenomenal, like they still go at the same pace as the stories he writes for kids, but now they're about Nazi Germany, or they're about like exploring themes of like incest and sexual assault in it's sometimes not the best way, often not the best way, but there's this like weird creative interest that's always in there throughout, where he's just getting these crazy ideas out of his head regardless of who he's writing for. And I think he's one of the great creators of all time.
Oh yeah.
And you know, it's also one of those creators whose influence can be seen for better or worse, like still everywhere, not just in Japanese animation, but also like in animation throughout the world. But a lot of animators, you know, famous animators like Miyazaki himself, don't have many good things to say about Tezuka because of a deal that he was basically forced to make when making the first ever animated TV series in Japan, The Mighty Atom, aka Astro Boy. Yes. He had to basically like make it for such little money that he like basically ruined any chance of anyone getting paid fairly in anime for forever.
It's still happening now, right?
It's interesting because we talk a lot on the show about how challenging the anime industry is for those who work within it, right? It's incredibly difficult. So I've actually got some notes here from back when I was doing a degree about, and one of them was about anime and popular culture, Asian popular culture, and we had the anime. So I just want to do something from one of the lectures here. This is from Dr.
For anyone else that feels like giving Sam a wedgie right now, I want you to know that before I got here, there was AFL paraphernalia all over the wall, and he was producing a football podcast, all right? So he will deck you. Don't even try.
I'm a complicated man, but but this is from Dr. Masafumi Monden at University of Sydney from his lecture, and this is just really fascinating. So Tezuka's mixed media system was, and they actually called it the Curse of Tezuka, right? So in anime circles, Tezuka was the architect of the model of the contemporary anime media mix, a production system based on a complementary proliferation of IP. So rather than direct consumption toward a single element of a media franchise, the media mix basically fosters an environment where each piece can lead to consumption to the next. Serialization and of brands and merchandise and all these sorts of things, which we now see, which is ubiquitous in the industry. But due to the legacy of Tezuka's anime production world, the industry continues to be plagued by low and high workloads. For every dollar it costs to actually produce an animation, it's estimated most anime studios are paid 90 cents. So losses in initial expenditure are expected to be recouped via sales of merchandise, home media, related goods through licensing agreements. So we talk about the production committee system, which is basically what a group of usually very large businesses get together, take on an IP, and they stand to win all the profits and or absorb all the losses. But as a result, they sell essentially the rights to an animation studio who just get a lump sum, and they just got to make that show with a lump sum. So if it's a hit, doesn't matter. If it's a flop, they are protected from it, but it means they're less likely to be picked up by another production committee later on down the line. That's kind of how it works, and it was because Tezuka had no choice but to cobble this system together because
no one would take him seriously.
no one would take him seriously. And
Because they were importing cartoons from America.
Yes.
And they got them for really cheap. So why shouldn't the cartoons they produce in Japan be as cheap as what they're paying for the American ones, which were already successful?
Exactly right. So it's really interesting, and as you mentioned before, between Miyazaki, because Miyazaki, obviously, as we spoke about in our episode not long ago with Gerald about the storytelling of Miyazaki, Miyazaki likes to work in the complete opposite fashion to this. He'll just start drawing and then just chase wherever that drawing takes him, and then he'll
And
build.
even now, like, he won't even draw. He'll just start animating.
Yeah.
The guy doesn't even do storyboards. He has no idea how his movies are going to end, which
Exactly.
is why some of them you're like, oh.
Okay. But it's really, really interesting because it's just such a different way of working. And as a result, many people would call Miyazaki the godfather of anime films. And I think that's very, very fair. So you got the two guys very much in opposition to one another. Well, they just very much disagreed about the process of doing work in that way. But also interesting about Tezuka because of he was much less constrained in his manga creation than he was in creating this anime system.
Because what do you need to create manga? Obviously, all the ideas in your head, and of which he had billions.
Yes.
But, you just need a pen and paper to create it.
Yes.
And, like, he was so successful at manga, but bankrupted himself twice trying to make animation his main focus. Yeah, I as someone that frequently tries to do too much, I think it's a good person to keep in my mind. Like, if you just stay doing manga, like, there are so many people. I think I'm in the minority of people that prefer to read manga over watching anime. And the bulk of the people that know his name probably know it as the Curse of Tezuka, as the reason that they feel slightly guilty when they enjoy an anime, because they know that all the people that worked so hard to create that thing got paid like a tenth of what they did for, their first job as a teenager.
Yeah. And working unconscionable hours to get it done under the most intense pressure. It is crazy. And it's interesting to go back on the history there, but I guess we need to talk about the absolute paradigm shift that was Astro Boy, because obviously everyone here probably hasn't actually watched any Astro Boy. Those of you watching, I mean, I can't even remember watching an episode of it, but my God, do I remember that song and do I remember that imagery?
Have you been to anywhere in Tokyo where that song, like if you go to where Tezuka lived for a while, that song was the station's jingle, the Astro Boy theme song. Yeah, there's so many, so many moments like that.
Yeah, that's the thing, and it really did change everything. We just spoke about how he got it made and how he sort of had no choice but to do so, but it really was an absolute game changer. Have you read Astro Boy?
Yeah, so I think I own over 100 translated Tezuka books. There's maybe less than 10 that I haven't got, and they all go for well over $1,000 each. They're severely out of print. But Dark Horse, they're pretty easy to get. Dark Horse did unfortunately it's flipped, but so it reads left to right. They've released the entire Astro Boy collection in omnibus size.
Wow.
But they're like paperback. They're really, they'd be like $40 from Kinokuniya.
Oh, wow. Pretty good.
So I got all those. Yeah. And I've read half of them. I've been trying to go through picking and choosing all these different points in his career to read books from every year. I probably read maybe the last 3 years I've read 10 long running series of his. I did his like life's work, Phoenix.
Yeah.
Oh,
Hero
Phoenix.
I was
Toys.
reading about that today, actually.
That's like when I was at the Tezuka Museum, that was the big exhibition.
Right.
So I did a Japan trip with my best friend this year, and I was like, I want to go to the Tezuka Museum. We want to go to Ghibli Park, and a few other things. But like the big push for myself was, okay, before I go to the Tezuka Museum, because there is the Phoenix exhibition there, I want to finally read all, however many thousand pages of Phoenix there are. And then I made sure I also watched every single Ghibli movie, even like all of the Takahata movies and the non Miyazaki
Gorus,
joints. Yeah. Here's the spoiler. They're all pretty good.
Yeah.
I think that was one of the, when you were like, what do you want to talk about on your episode? I was like, well, we could talk about like all of the non Miyazaki Ghibli movies, because I'm a big Takahata head. My favorite is Pompoko, which is the raccoon movie.
Yeah.
And every what's that?
Mine's Grave of the Fireflies.
Oh, amazing! Yeah. But every time I told a Japanese person that, they laughed at me.
What, dude?
But seeing all of the original layouts, like ink, and like you see the whiteout and then the ink over the whiteout of those original Phoenix pages at the exhibition was crazy.
Well, speaking of being in Japan and buying unique collectibles and items, this episode is brought to you by Mercari. If you wanted to buy unique items direct from Japan, like Andrew was just talking about doing, well, instead of traveling, you can do it right on your desktop and or phone. Head to Mercari.com, where you can just click Mercari X Japan, click Shop the Drop, and look for all kinds of unique items directly from Japan itself. Manga, collectibles, fashion, ceramics, anything you can think of, you can probably find on Mercari with Mercari X Japan. Thanks again for supporting us. Thanks for sponsoring this episode. Check out the link in the bio. Happy shopping.
Phoenix's was a life work, and it was never completed, right? Because his death, or like it has been,
So
but it was
I guess
meant to be continued, I guess, as long as he was alive.
Yeah. So he actually starts writing it in the 50s and revisits it like over a decade later, and then starts. There were meant to be 12 volumes of it, and he never gets to the 12th volume. Unfortunately, he dies, and one of his last words were, "Let me draw." He like drew himself to death. Yeah. The guy loved to work. But I think you have to, if you go to archive.org, there is like the entire translated series for you to read there. Do not do what I'm trying to do and pay hundreds of dollars for each volume of the translated Phoenix. I'm sure at one point someone else will get the rights to it and publish it properly for everyone. But it does have a really, really satisfying ending because it's less an ongoing story and more. Each volume tells its own contained story with returning motifs. But what's really unique about it is the first volume of Phoenix is set in the past, and then the second volume is set in the future. Then it's set a little bit more furthered forward in the past, and then then a little bit further back in the future. And so gradually, as you get to volume 12, they were going to meet in the middle, and then there was going to be this big, conclusion. But even without that, it's still a legendary work.
Yeah, because as you mentioned before, he was doing children's work, which of course became Astro Boy. But then to be able to, the amount of work he's actually done, like everyone's like, oh, Astro Boy, right, that guy. Not even close to scratching the surface, as you just mentioned. Hundreds and hundreds of copies of books and series. He just, like Miyazaki, the thing they definitely share, insane work ethic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, absolutely.
Much to the detriment of themselves and everyone around them.
Yes. Yes.
And I think, him running an animation studio, when you expect everyone to work as hard as you do, it's not sustainable. It's not healthy. It's not good. But there are actually people like, manga creators and manga historians that have the same level of disdain towards Tezuka as the animators do, because of the rules that he set and was so strong on, like, no, manga must be this. And it wasn't until he was successfully challenged by those Gekiga creators that he redefined those rules for himself too. And those are some of his best works, like Letter to Adolf. Which is a 2-part series about 3 men named Adolf, and one of them happens to be Hitler.
Wow.
And that's a brilliant work. Like so interesting and cool, but also like it just moves at this breakneck pace. It's like a crime thriller. It's so much fun. Yeah.
I haven't heard of that.
I've never heard of that. I'm surprised I haven't, because it sounds right up my alley. I'm like, what? I'm like, what is this unhinged theory? Like, what is this thing I'm about to watch? To me, the other most famous thing that obviously had such huge impact on the West is obviously Kimba.
Kimba the White Lion. Yes.
Which the Lion King just played, like, just kind of, yeah.
Okay, so there is a famous YouTuber who actually watched Kimba the White Lion and kind of was like, this movie's insane. And because I even made a video where I kind of said offhand, like because I reviewed the Kimba movie for a film festival, and I said offhand it was a big influence on The Lion King. And every comment was like, no, it wasn't, because this one YouTuber watched them side by side and was like, there's really, besides the fact that it's about a lion whose names rhyme, there's nothing similar about The Lion King. And
Well,
yeah. So
egg on my
saved
face.
You. I know I've saved you. I've saved you from angry comments.
To be fair, I guess we do know The Lion King is Hamlet, so that's one thing that is very,
Well,
you know,
yes,
that's,
yeah,
so
it's
that's
basically
kind of,
Hamlet.
There's plenty of other people that ripped off, I'm sure.
that's true. Shakespeare, but not Tezuka. Not this time.
Not this time.
Yeah.
Not the Shakespeare of manga. One might. Sorry, I don't know what I'm saying here.
So I've read the Kimba story, and it's really fun and like, but a bit like goofy and light. The animation, the first animation that Tezuka himself worked on, is so strange. And like, if you like watching weird pieces of art, I would definitely recommend it. But like, it's animated in the same way that, like, if you've seen like the Fleischer Superman cartoons from like the 30s,
yes.
it feels very like it's so limited in movement and motion. But it's still worth watching as like a historical piece.
Kimba, next on the list.
Back to Kimba.
We're doing it.
Just to touch back on Astro Boy. After he graduated in 1951 from medical school, guy was a full doctor, as we mentioned before. Just calm down, mate. You know what I mean? Making us all look bad. But he published a thing called Ambassador Adam. Do you know? Have you come across that one?
And that's where the character first appears.
Exactly right. Yes, that was the first appearance of Astro Boy as a character. And by 52, Ambassador Adam only had proven to be sort of a mild success. It actually wasn't a big deal. But the character of Adam was super popular amongst young boys. They were just like all about it. And he received so many letters, fan letters from kids being like, I love this character. I love all about him. And he was like, okay. So then it was actually his producer who suggested giving Adam the human emotions and then building that story around. So that's how it all came about. So his original character from a different story who got a huge response, and then through working with his editor, created what would become the phenomenon that is, of course, Astro Boy, which just changed the game. And just, I guess even listening to you about how much he also, to his credit, obviously he was very iron-willed and stubborn about how he wanted things done. But the fact that those other creators shifted him is fascinating. And the fact that he could change his work.
I think it got to a breaking point where he had to, and it was a matter of his own pride, where he like had to show these younger writers that he could write adult stories too, and also like it was time for a change as well. I think I don't think there was any humility in what he did.
How do you feel about the modern adaptations of his work? So we've got, is it Dororo they did recently in 2016?
Yes, I've never seen Dororo, which is on Amazon Prime, but I know some people really like that.
It's good.
What is really unique is, I don't know if you've talked about this before, the like handful of anime series that have been sent to Disney Plus to die.
Disney Jail.
Yeah.
There is a Phoenix adaptation. My least favorite of the books got adapted into a 4-part anime series called Eden 17. It's my least favorite chapter of Phoenix because it involves basically it's like a take on the Adam and Eve story, but in this story the sons of this one woman, she can't have daughters, so she keeps basically freezing herself and having children with her children's. It's a fun sci-fi romp about incest. And
Anime was a mistake again. Like I just.
And in this case, it's manga was a mistake. But they somehow managed to avoid that part of the story in telling what is mostly a good story. But with that part, I was like, what is he doing
What's
here?
this about? He took a
And like
left hand
they're like, no, I need to be the one to have children with mother. Like, blah, blah. It's like all these arguments, like, Phoenix in 17 is like a really, really like tastefully done take on that story, which I'd recommend.
Okay, cool.
And it's it's less than 2 hours of your life, pretty small investment, and a great little intro to the Phoenix story.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So what would you suggest to people if they want, again, some people hear of this almost otherworldly figure of Osamu Tezuka But what would you suggest to people if they just want to go and read a manga to get in? Like, I'd say Astro Boy is probably dated, right? Like,
I mean, it is and it isn't. The Astro Boy story that Pluto is based on,
Yes.
is in that first volume of the Dark Horse omnibus of Astro Boy, and that is so much fun.
Interesting.
And then you also get to read a bunch of insane shit around it, where it's because every like one in every 2 or 3 Astro Boy stories just is bonkers. Like one where like there's one where he like. Someone challenges him to a race because he's modified his body into becoming a race car, and then the race car crashes and the kid dies, and then the Astro Boy's like, well, I'm glad I'm won, but I'm sorry about your brother.
Oh, come on.
But I kind of like, I love the insanity that comes along with it.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But like, I think, you know, Astro Boy is a story for kids and definitely has a lot of like adult themes throughout it. And it is just a fun all ages romp. My favorite of his more adult works is Ode to Kirihito, which is a story about a man who visits a remote village and then starts to turn into a dog. And he and Miyazaki, I would say the one trait that they both share is like, sometimes you'll be watching a Ghibli movie and you'll be like, is he making this up as he goes along? And Tezuka has that, and sometimes it works. There is this like wild sense of adventure that he's having an adventure as he writes this story that I really like, and that's evident in Kirihito. It has a really amazing ending. A lot of fucked up stuff happens in that book too, but go along for the ride. It's crazy. It was written in a different time. Just embrace it and have fun. And then Blackjack, which is probably his most famous series after Astro Boy, and funnily enough, the one that ties the most into his other career, because Blackjack is a surgeon. And he is a surgeon who basically gets paid the big bucks to come and do the surgeries that other doctors don't want to touch. And
a house figure, if you will.
Yeah. And it's a really, really cool series. And it's pretty easy to get the first 3 volumes of that series. And it's not one that has an end to end. You can just jump in at any point and enjoy the stories.
Yeah. What were your thoughts on Pluto? Did you enjoy it?
So I love Pluto, the manga. Urasawa is one of my favorite writers.
I too.
Almost finished Billy Bat, which is one of the works that hasn't been translated officially. And that is crazy. And you know, I don't know if anyone's noticed, but I love animation and comic history, and that is so ingrained in that book. It's about a guy who starts drawing a comic strip called Billy Bat, and someone goes, "Oh, I know that character. I saw him in Japan." And he's like, "No, what are you talking about? I created this character myself." And they're like, "No, he's famous in Japan too." So he goes to Japan to figure out if he's actually created this character, or has he stolen this character from someone else, or is Billy Bat this mysterious symbol that's existed throughout all history? One of those things is true. Which one will it be?
Wow.
But yeah, Urasawa writes amazing mystery stories that I think will often, like, I don't know if you read 20th Century Boys or even Monster, they're great, but they kind of lose themselves because they just go on for a bit too long.
Yeah, that's fair.
But Pluto is 9 volumes and done. It's the perfect length, and obviously drawing on the Astro Boy mythos and characters. I think it's really good. I haven't actually finished the anime. I love that first episode. I think is brilliant with the piano and all that. I think that's like really well done. But then it kind of fell into this like, well, I've already read this story twice, and this is just telling it to me slower than I could read it. And it does look pretty, but yeah, I will get to it one day. But I think with anime, to get back to the question we posed to ourselves earlier in the episode, I love watching things that I'm not familiar with in anime. So I guess maybe I should stop watching series that I've already read, but often that's the connection that I want to make, you know. But I love, like original animated series and movies. I love Evangelion.
Of course,
I love Cowboy Bebop because they weren't based on the material. That was the creator telling the story for the first time. And I think you can tell that, sometimes it just feels like, the serialization adaptation, sometimes you just fall into the traps of like, okay, now the cliffhanger is going to happen, and now this is it.
Especially in shonen adaptations, and
Of course.
because particularly if you're doing like a serialized monthly or like weekly, like you haven't even touched on the worst part of anime adaptations, which is fillers. So say watching Naruto, you've got like 300 episodes of pure filler that's not even canon, and that's the worst part to me. I do think that when something is properly, I think it's more kind of common to have it now because you have like less of a ongoing series and more of like just seasonal anime, which is kind of like you've got 12 episodes or 24 episodes. I think that they're kind of paced a little bit better than ongoing, you know. So I find, to me, I think it is down to what you watch or read first, because I would have the same hard time if I'd read something watching it. I'm kind of like, I've already done this, so I do agree.
Yep.
Same with reading it if I watched it, though. Even though people are like, the manga's way better, I'm like, yeah, but I watched it, so.
Okay, I went back and I read the Nausicaa Valley of the Wind after watching the movie a few times, and that manga is crazy.
Yeah.
It's so much more of an epic. Like, it's closer to Berserk than it is than it is a Ghibli movie. Yeah,
Really? Crazy.
yeah. So there are totally like moments where I would agree with you, like just revisiting a story for a second time. But often with manga, I feel like I do like allow myself to take in the story a second time, because I'm like, no, this is the way it was initially meant to be told, and I'm like, you know, always like lately with my daughter who's 8 is finally at a point where she can read fast enough to we're watching all the Ghibli classics without the dubs. I don't know what your thoughts on subs and dubs are. Do we get into another argument in this episode? But I can't handle them, and I think it might have to do with the fact that I'm not American. Like, I feel like a lot of my American friends, or like, you know, podcasters that I like that will often watch the dubs, you know, you're just hearing American voices and that's normal to you.
Yes.
For me, it's just, I'm hearing this like extremely heightened American accent do these characters that clearly wouldn't sound like that. I can never let myself like enjoy a dub. It always just feels so goofy to me. There's some pretty well done ones. There's a British dub of Arrietty, the Ghibli movie, which I thought was really well done. Watching like Kiki's Delivery Service over the weekend with the original Japanese audio, and my daughter's like, who's watched, you know, Kiki's like 12 times in the last year, is like, oh, that line's different. And that line's different. That line's, yeah. And so even she's like noticing all these differences, and they're even, you know, that's tenfold when you read the manga compared to the anime.
100%.
Yeah.
I just, one thing about, look, I mean, maybe I just am such a fan of like any medium on screen. So I feel like, to me, things are elevated once you kind of put in voice acting, music, and like the kind of, maybe I just prefer to watch mediums. I'm a big reader too, though, so I don't know. Maybe I just need to read more manga. That might actually be the problem.
So I'm this is embarrassing, but I imagine them. You know, everyone has how they would sound in my head as I read them.
True.
And you know, I'm sure I'm putting musical cues in there sometimes too. But you spoke out against filler, and I know I've watched a lot of bad One Piece episodes that were filler. But there is something that I'm like, oh, that's something I haven't experienced though. So like, I'm an idiot that I would, maybe if I was ever to watch like Dragon Ball, for example, I would only watch the filler because that's where all the cool fits come from. Where it's like, isn't there an episode where like Goku goes to get like his driver's license or something like
There
that? Like,
is,
that sounds awesome.
I mean,
Goku does normal things.
Yeah.
yeah.
It is pretty funny, but I will agree with you wholeheartedly on subs versus dubs. And also like,
I don't know. I think it's down to what you watch first. I actually do, because
degree.
I think the Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood dub is as good as the sub. If not, sometimes better.
it's good.
It's
is
a
one of the better ones,
fantastic one.
for sure.
I think it's because it's hard. Like, the localization of it is also hard as well. So you've got to have someone who like can, like the translating team and that, to kind of make it work and make it feel in character and make it not just be, because a direct translation will not work in dub, because you've got to like, so it's kind of, there's a whole
Back off, Sakuragi-kun, like stuff like that.
But I think we've come a long way. I mean, I know that Brotherhood was in, you know, well, actually ages ago now that I'm thinking about it, but that's a particularly good example. I definitely always watch sub as a general rule.
You know, even if it's not the manga adaptation, the original manga, at least it's the original anime.
Yes.
It's that's how that director intended it to be
Totally.
watched.
Yes,
Yeah.
there's
But
a whole
I-
layer
I
at a dub. Yeah.
do think there are some cases, and I actually think the Ghibli films have a lot of effort put into their dubs, and they are worthwhile watching, depending. And also, some people need to watch dubs. You know, so some people really struggle with subtitles. Obviously, for us, we're all fucking anime
Avid
nerds,
readers,
so we
yeah.
read and like that's fine. But I think there's an argument for dubs. But that being said, like, you would not catch me watching a dub like out of free will. Like, if I'm so I hear you.
I hate it when you like I buy a lot of movies off iTunes, and like I bought like the most recent Lupin the Third movie, for example, and I didn't know that it didn't come with the Japanese audio. It's just only the dub. Same as if you buy Akira on there as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no. Yeah, I think we went to see Haikyuu, the latest movie, recently, and we didn't read that it was a dub, and we sat down in the cinema and we actually got up and left.
Oh,
We were like,
amazing.
no, because
Respect.
I've just watched the whole, you know, and then we accidentally booked into the 4K version. which is like the seats were moving.
Oh,
and
that's
it was
40X.
like for
Yeah,
40X.
40X.
What's 4K? Sorry, the 4K version of this.
That was Ghost in the Shell.
I'm a 40X connoisseur, so yeah.
I've never seen one before, and Haikyuu was my first one, and honestly, it was one of the funniest things I've ever experienced because it was just like every time he went to do a quick attack or anything, we were just like grabbing onto the chair, like and getting like blown with things, and I was just going, "This is a true experience." But at least it's not dubbed, you know.
I saw Mugen Train in
That would be-
40X, and it was the greatest 2 hours of my life.
That would be so
that
fun.
would be epic. But
I want to see Twisters. I think that'd be a great
that'd
one.
be a great one.
Yeah.
Lot of wind being blown.
I
So
saw
yeah.
Fast and Furious 9 in
That
40X. That
would
was
be
really
fun.
good too. Yeah.
But I will just
I
put
need
a
to get
point
into
on.
it.
I will just put a point on the difference between subs and dubs. Like obviously our show is Gateway to Anime. So again, if I've always said that our preference is obviously
It's not
subtitles.
gatekeeping anime.
But yeah.
I thought that's what I was signing up
Not
for.
gatekeep. Yeah. Oh wait a minute. You idiots.
That's what Sam would have his way if he had this
Well,
podcast.
no, I mean, obviously, my whole thing is like, I just want people to get into the thing that I love. You know what I mean? So I've always been like, if the difference between you watching anime and not is that you want to watch it with dub and, you know, reading is not your thing or you just don't like hearing those voices or whatever, if the difference is going to be you watching anime and not with the dubs, listen to the dubs. Great. Watch anime. That's all we care for. But I would argue, to go back on the point, the best way to consume it in its most pure form
Is the
manga, obviously. But other than that, yes, with the voice acting of the Japanese, I think it adds an extra layer.
No. By watching the anime, you are respecting the hard work of many more
Yeah,
people
that is
than the one.
different.
Yeah, I know.
They're so different, right? It's sort of, and I guess it's funny because I'm a massive reader, like reading books. If there's like a movie adaptation of a book, I'm rarely going to like it unless
Yeah.
it's like incredible, you know, unless they've fully got. So I understand entirely. It's the same thing, really, because you
Yeah.
imagine
Twilight
things.
Eclipse, eh? Yeah.
Devastated by that. Actually, maybe honestly, I think the film's elevated that because it was like full body horror shit going on. Like Twilight is I recommend watching it. It is one of the most insane pieces of cinema ever
Speaking
made.
of unhinged.
Like seriously, the fourth one in particular, guys. Go. Yep, that's my new podcast. It's just me talking about Twilight and
Just
how
the
that's
fourth one.
Just that.
the fourth.
Nothing else.
Underrated.
Just Breaking Dawn. That's it. Yeah, nothing else happening here. Anyway, seriously though, like I think that makes sense to me. But I really, I don't know. I think I prefer anime to manga. So
me too,
I don't know. That's
Yeah, I mean, it's not called Gateway to Manga. It's fine.
Yeah.
I should pick my battles.
No, but it's really interesting because obviously Graham, our other host, we got him on here as we sort of call him the manga guy. He would pale in comparison to your
sure he
level of
wouldn't,
reading.
yeah.
He's very good. He reads an awful lot. But yeah, he also flips between because he reads a lot more manga than we do. But yeah, I mean, for example, something like you mentioned Mugen Train, right? And a good example of an IP, I would argue, heavily elevated by its anime adaptation.
Yeah.
Like, I have read all the manga of
I'm
Demon
a
Slayer.
defender of
Yeah.
the Demon Slayer manga. I know a lot
It's
of people
good.
don't like it.
It's
but,
good.
yeah.
Like it's fine, but like you compare it to like those hype moments like we just saw in episode 8 of the latest season. I mean, when I read that, I was like, cool. When I watched it, I was like,
it's
Wow.
because of Ufotable's
UFO
animation.
table, man.
Like,
That's what I mean. That is a clear case of what I think is a huge elevation of content of IP by adapting it and by doing it.
It's
so
because the
well.
storyline of Demon Slayer isn't that good. Sorry.
fine.
Like it ticks all my
it just-
boxes.
yeah,
Don't get me
yeah.
wrong.
It
I'm
was,
always
it was
like,
a comfort read for me. Every
100%.
Monday you get a new very like, you know, you've read a version of this story a million times, but like
Yes.
these guys just cry more.
Zenitsu's yelling. Yeah, it's
I mean, I love it. Don't get me wrong, but I can see why that an animated version would elevate. Whereas Black Clover completely done disservice by the anime.
Dude, I love the Black Clover manga so much.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
I had to read it because it stopped. The anime stopped, and
Yeah,
it's still.
right.
I mean, it's trying to be fair. Like Groundbreaking, we talked about this. It stopped, and it went. We're not gonna do it again until we have more to adapt. They're like, we're not doing new fillers here,
Yes,
which
no
I was
fillers.
like, wow.
So is any of that anime good?
It's I did watch it all
Yeah.
in the end because it really was getting it was really ticking a lot of my shonen boxes. I was loving the world build. I was enjoying the characters, but it's just like it's kind of throwing back to what you were saying before about One Piece and like Naruto, where it does feel somewhat rushed. You kind of get repeats of the same thing happening. It just felt like a little bit like more old school, but I kind of enjoyed that as well. So I think we're used to these really like, you know, Demon Slayer level adaptations of things where you get this amazing animation, whereas this animation was sort of like fine the whole way through. But I will watch Black Clover when it comes back out. Like I no disrespect to Black Clover, except for that weird sibling storyline with that guy who's into his sister. It's like one
That's
character.
It's just a trait though.
I
trope,
know,
though, isn't
but
it?
I'm
Yeah.
like, why
Why
are
does
we
it
doing
exist?
this again?
Because there's one person somewhere and still finds it funny.
Yeah. Yeah. But no, the manga is fantastic. So it's another
I
kind
love
of
that, like like, someone creates like the most perfect series and then it's just the job of one person to be like, okay, what if, hear me out, there's a character on the team who's a pervert. Wouldn't that be fun?
Wouldn't that be
Wouldn't
funny?
that be really fun and fresh?
My Hero Academia.
Never fails.
The creator of My Hero Academia just backed Minato so hard as
So
well. They were like,
hard.
what if we just committed to this character being here the whole time? I was like, just kill him off. Like, I don't care.
Sideline him.
Like,
Don't need to see him anymore.
Well, you mentioned My Hero, which is a manga series that I like endured for so long, 300 and something chapters, and then I was like, I can't do this anymore.
I gave up, right?
One of, if not the least favorite thing I've ever read.
Wow.
I was like, when is this character going to, like, the main dude? When is he going to do something that is going to make me like be excited to continue to read his adventures? Whereas the spin-off series, My Hero Vigilantes, is amazing.
Really?
Like, so good. I don't know if they're ever going to animate that, but like, do you keep up with watching My Hero?
Oh, I've dropped off like a million. It's one of those ones that I keep dropping off for the same reasons, and I'll come back to it and be like really into it for no apparent reason. I think I find the world entertaining in itself. Do I like Deku as a protagonist?
There's so
No
many
way.
good ideas in that series, and that's why it hurts that I was like, oh cool, it's just going to be like anime X-Men. This will be great.
Yes.
And it's so boring and like,
Yeah, I find
I'm still watching it somehow. Still watching it every week.
I
Not
love the
airing,
first
yeah.
season.
bring on the slop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's-
Yeah,
I'm
Yeah,
just like,
I watched the first season of that too, and it is I had fun with it. That's how I started watching it. I was like, this is pretty good, and I kept reading it, and then I was like, when is this gonna actually get good though?
Yeah, I'm a bit of a My Hero defender.
Me too,
I
like,
kind of like I just go because every time I drop off though, and I have the same reason I started again, and I'm like, this is great, and then I'm like, no, I'm over it again, and then I'm like, what are the like? So I feel like it's just not consistent.
and the downs are down. Like,
Oh,
it's-
yeah.
when it's bad, it's bad. You
But
know what I mean?
think
But when it's
about-
good, very, very
But
good.
it's one of those shows that this means it's probably not that well written. I can skip a bunch of it and really understand exactly what's happening.
Yeah,
still.
right,
I'll be
sure.
like,
True.
too long didn't read. Like, what's next? Like skip a few
Yeah,
episodes.
there's so many side characters that I feel like the series would be so much better if they were the main character.
My favorite thing is just seeing who gets what quirk and how they've managed to make it work for themselves.
Yeah.
That's like,
world
maybe
building.
what's his name, Lemillion? Maybe he should have been
Oh.
the protagonist.
Well, he was supposed to get all for one. So one for all.
One for all, yeah.
Yeah.
But hey, I mean, obviously we couldn't have that because we need to have a person
Struggle.
who's not like that makes sense
That
for
was
the
the whole
whole
point. Yeah.
hard work first.
The hero is your drive and character.
Yeah.
But Lemons, we could talk to you for hours and hours and hours, but I'm conscious of your time. Thank you so much.
I got you guys
joining
presents.
Oh,
I figured
no way.
Why would I just talk about toys and not give you some?
Oh my gosh.
So, I knew there were 3 of you. And
Yes,
so I brought
crazy.
2 boys and 1 girl, but now I realized they all look like Charlie.
It's me.
Oh, is
again.
that Tokyo Revengers?
Oh, yeah, maybe it's a Tokyo
I think that's
Revengers
Tokyo
guy.
Revengers.
Okay.
Sounds-
Yeah.
I don't watch or read that one.
not sure
And then I know that's
Awesome
Demon
thing.
Slayer.
Yeah,
That's what's
Yes,
from the last arc.
yes.
So
We
We've
know-
got the Mr. Shiro.
I have no idea who this is. Maybe like someone from like Yuru Camp or something.
No, that is from Golden Kamui.
Okay, wow, cool.
yeah.
Wow, maybe I shouldn't have let that one go.
I was like,
I know that's a series that I want to eventually read.
thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much.
I'll let you know how the manga for it is when I
Yes,
read it.
please. I heard it's very good.
But yeah, you have a collection of 3 Sleepy Charlies.
Yes.
Because they're all in bed. I don't know that's like a
Perfect.
gotcha thing where they're like, yeah, we'll do a series of 5 characters from this anime in bed.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Love.
Of course.
Not going to ask any questions.
Yeah. Stunning.
Thank you so much. So tell people where can they find you? Where can they?
Yeah, so I make videos every single day on my TikTok and Instagram and now YouTube too. All of them are Levins online. Especially, I'd love some help on YouTube. I only started 2 weeks ago. I thought it would be easy like TikTok was. It's not. It sucks. It's rough out here, man. Please help.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and your wealth of knowledge is extraordinary. Huh? Your knowledge of Tezuka and manga, and we hope to keep collaborating with you in many ways and talking.
Of course,
because
yeah.
we're
Happy to come back anytime.
All Sydney folk, which is really cool. So thank you so much, everyone, for listening. That has been our talk about manga versus anime and the legend of Osamu Tezuka. We can't thank you enough. Again, Andrew, for joining us. As he said, find him on Levins Online. And also, you can find us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, where hopefully you're watching this podcast. But if you're listening to us, you can go give us a review on Spotify and or Apple. Really does make a difference. If you really like what we're doing, you can find us on Patreon, where we do early release of these very episodes, as well as unique content directly for the patrons. You can join for as little as $1.50 a month. So help us out there if you really like what we're doing. It really does make a difference. And thank you once again to this episode's sponsor, Mercari. Check out the link. Thanks for sponsoring us. Thanks so much for listening. We appreciate it as always. We'll catch you all next time. Levins, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
No worries. See you
Bye,
soon.
guys.